we are now only 2 weeks away from the start of the NFL season, and that means fantasy football drafts are starting to go down. Today, we're going to look at my final running back rankings and tiers for this offseason, and we're going to be going through my top 34 running backs. And as a bonus, I'm going to be throwing in a couple sleepers at the end of this video for running backs I'm targeting late in drafts. Before we jump in, I want to say thank you for 100 subs. This is the first summer of Yam Talks, and your engagement definitely inspires me to keep pumping out content. So we're going to jump right in here with tier one. So tier one is going to include running backs who can carry your team's score and responsibility any given week, and like the name suggests, go and win you your leagues. So these guys have the realistic potential to finish as the #1 running back in all of fantasy. So honestly, nothing's changed a lot here since the start of the summer. The tier one backs for me are still Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Barkley and Bijan being my 1A and 1B, and Jahmyr Gibbs just this much behind them. If you're drafting a running back in the top 8 of this year's drafts, and any of these 3 running backs are there, these are the guys you have to draft. They all finished as a top 3 back last year, and each of these guys has a clear path to finishing as the RB1 in this season. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because, like I said, tier 1 is pretty clear cut, and it hasn't changed for me since my last update 2 months ago. So now we move on to tier 2, and these are running backs you can confidently start every week, and regardless of their opponent, you're going to get elite level production, and these guys have the potential to finish as top 5 backs this season. So this is when things start to change a lot from even a month ago. And the first running back in this tier we have is Derrick Henry. So even at an older age, even with the lack of pass catching, and even on a new team, last season we saw King Henry finish as the RB4 in PPR, playing in all 17 games. So not much has changed this summer with this Ravens offense that would have a detrimental effect on Derrick Henry. Sure, age is an argument here, but there were no indications of him slowing down last season at the age of 30. So until we see otherwise, look for another strong finish for the King. Next up, we have Devon Achane. Achane possesses all the traits for a top 5 fantasy running back with what he brings as a runner and a pass catcher. We saw this last season when he did finish as the RB5 in PPR. And the Dolphins offense, to be honest, was a mess last season. Now we have hopefully a healthy Tua coming in to quarterback this offense, and that should result in more scoring opportunities for Achane. All right, so next, Christian McCaffrey was at the bottom of this tier early this summer, but he's managed to creep up a few spots, and the injury concerns still linger with him, but he's looked mostly like himself in training camp this summer. He 100% has the highest upside out of every running back in this tier, and if there were no major injury concerns surrounding CMC, he'd no doubt be in tier 1 for me. So I don't mind taking the gamble on his health at the end of the first or top of the second, but just know you are rolling the dice when you draft CMC. So next up, we have our first rookie, and that's Ashton Jeanty. When I did this video 2 months ago, Jeanty was the first back in this tier, but I bumped him down a few spots, not because I don't think he can still be a top 5 running back in fantasy this season, but I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to some of the more established guys above him who we've seen have recent top 5 finishes. So yeah, Jeanty is a rookie, but do not let that stop you from drafting him with your late first or early second. By week 6 at the latest, I envision this Raiders offense to be fully running through Ashton Jeanty, considering they lack established receiving threats. And Ashton Jeanty was taken number 6 overall as a generational prospect at the running back position. This is the highest I've ever had a rookie running back in my rankings, and he definitely warrants it. So finally, we have a newcomer to this tier, and that is Bucky Irving. I added him to tier 2 before making this video because it seems very likely that he could finish as at least the RB5 in fantasy this season. Over the last 6 weeks of his rookie season, we saw Bucky Irving have 3 weeks where he put up 23 plus PPR points. Bucky is a clear-cut lead back on a high-powered Bucs offense where he's going to see immense scoring opportunities. And if you're at the 1-2 run, he's a phenomenal pick in the early second. And if he falls to the middle of the second round, he is a home run pick. I'm very high on Bucky Irving this season. And speaking of home runs, I appreciate you watching this video to gain that winning edge this fantasy season, but let me help you even more. My fantasy football draft guide is now available to the public. This guide has all my rankings, notes, projections, and so much more. Let me do the work for you and provide you with the players you should be betting the house on and the guys you should not be drafting. As a computer scientist, I've created advanced AI and machine learning models on top of my countless hours of research that could give you the winning edge this season. So secure your guide by emailing me, messaging me on X, or just commenting down below. The price you pay today is the price you pay for the rest of your life. So each summer as this channel grows, I introduce new, more advanced models. You always pay what you pay today. And since this is the first summer on Yam Talks, I'm going to be giving out one guide every video for the rest of the summer. All you have to do is subscribe, like this video, and tell us your dark horse #1 running back in the comments down below. And a week from today, I will choose a winner from your comments. So let's move on to Tier 3. And Tier 3 consists of players we can expect to finish as top 10, top 12 running backs this season. And these players are going to produce impactful production on a weekly basis. And the first Tier 3 running back is Josh Jacobs. So Josh Jacobs finishes the RB6 in PPR last season, and he had a crazy tear between weeks 11 and 16, where he scored 20 plus points in all those games, and he had at least one touchdown in each of those games, even putting up 3 touchdowns in 2 of those games. So this is a very well-ran Packers offense, which will be quarterbacked by hopefully a healthy Jordan Love this season. And Josh Jacobs is going to reap the benefits of this offense as a clear lead back. His backup, Marshawn Lloyd, is now also battling a recent injury that is expected to keep him out for a while, so expect Jacobs to receive a ton of opportunities. The next running back in this tier I'm very high on this season is Chase Brown. He's continued to surpass guys in my rankings throughout the summer, and the icing on the cake was that the Bengals released Zach Moss, who was Chase Brown's primary backup. The bottom line is that the Bengals defense still blows, and we saw how fruitful this offense was for fantasy production last season with an atrocious defense. Between weeks 9 and 15, Chase Brown had 19 plus points each of those weeks, scoring 26 plus points twice. Look for Chase Brown to take another step forward this season and be a legit RB1 in fantasy. And then next we'll move on to Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams had a very solid finish last season as the PPR RB7. And earlier this month, we saw the Rams award Kyren a 3-year, $33 million extension, giving him the 7th highest paid average annual salary at the running back position. So what this tells us is that this solidifies his status as the lead back in McVay's offense, even with Blake Corum and Jarquez Hunter in the room. Kyren should still see a lot of meaningful opportunities this season, but things do get a little interesting now with the recent Matt Stafford back injury concern. If Stafford does miss time, Kyren could see less scoring opportunities, but an uptick in touches. But I'm not going to try to dissect this Matt Stafford situation. I still like Kyren Williams as an RB1 at the end of the second round. And then next up, we have Jonathan Taylor. So it's really challenging for me to get as excited about JT as some of the other backs in this tier, simply because of the uncertainty revolving around this Colts offense. But we do know now that Danny Dimes is the starter in Indy. And honestly, I do think this is going to work in the favor of Jonathan Taylor in comparison to if AR was a starter. And we did see JT finish the RB12 in PPR last season in only 14 games on a Colts offense that still had a ton of question marks. And we saw him at his peak last season when he went on a tear over the last 3 weeks of the year, where he put up 39.8, 27.6, and 25 points in PPR. So JT is a solid RB1 target in the later stages of the second round. And then next up is Bills running back James Cook. If I'm being honest, James Cook was a player I was looking to fade until the recent contract extension. A 4-year, $48 million contract extension extinguishes any rumors of the Bills not valuing James Cook as their premier back with the emergence of a young Ray Davis. He finishes the RB8 in PPR last season, and with the recent contract extension and the Bills being one of the more elite offenses in the league, I see no reason why James Cook can't be a top 12 running back in fantasy this year. And the final player in this tier is Alvin Kamara. Kamara was a late 4th round pick in fantasy drafts only a month ago, but now he's going around that 3-4 turn. I understand the concerns with Kamara when you bring up his age and the team he plays for, but we saw him feast last season in a similar situation. In the 14 games that Alvin Kamara did play, he had a staggering 265.3 PPR points, finishing him as the RB9. And this offseason, the Saints just gave Kamara a 2-year, $24.5 million extension at the age of 29. So what this tells me is that the Saints still think he has a ton of juice left in the tank to help with their young quarterbacks. So look for Alvin Kamara to get a lot of targets this season and finish as a top 12 running back. Next up, we go on to tier 4, and these are players who are very capable of being starters on your fantasy teams, but they're going to have weeks where they maybe finish as one of the best players at the position, but they're also going to have weeks where they don't have elite production due to matchups or other factors. So these running backs do have the realistic potential to finish as top 15 to top 24 players at the position. So I view these guys as more like RB2s than RB1s. And the first running back in this tier is Chuba Hubbard. So Chuba was a massive bright spot for the Carolina Panthers last year. And this Panthers team has started to look like it's finding its identity, especially its offense. And last season, he had a 1,000-yard season on a contract year, which secured him a four-year deal with Carolina. And through all the ups and downs in Carolina last year, he did finish as the RB14 in PPR, playing in only 15 games. So like I said earlier, the Panthers offense is expected to take a step forward this season. So look for Chuba to continue to find fantasy success beyond a top 10 O-line in the NFL. And then next up, we have James Conner. James Conner was the RB11 in PPR last season. Age is a concern here as he turns 30 years old, but I do believe the Cardinals are going to look to establish their pass game more frequently than the run. But James Conner is still one of the better running backs in the NFL, and I love him as an RB2 target. And next, we have a rookie that has shot up my rankings over the summer, and that is Omarion Hampton. Najee Harris's unfortunate firework accident was a massive for Hampton's summer as a rookie. Hampton was always probably going to be the lead back in LA come week 8 or mid-season. But with Najee now being out throughout the whole summer, Hampton has been getting reps in with the first team offense throughout training camp and preseason. So he is now locked and loaded to be the Chargers RB1 on a team that had a top 10 unit when it came to running the ball last season. Hampton is one of the most enticing running back picks in fantasy drafts this year. And if he lives up to the hype as a rookie, he could be a top 14 running back in fantasy this season. And the next back in this tier, someone I'm fading in all my drafts, and that is Breece Hall. So if you want to break down why I'm fading Breece Hall, make sure to check out my RBs to fade video, which I'll have at the corner of your screen up there somewhere. But he still does belong in this tier because of his talent that should place him as a top 24 running back in fantasy this season. And next up, we have another rookie, and that's TreVeyon Henderson. Trey has not only climbed my rankings this summer, but he's also climbed draft boards. I've seen him go as early as the start of the 4th round in recent drafts. And a lot of that has to do with how good he's looked in preseason and the explosive skill set he brings out of OSU. He's a very strong RB2 target who will be heavily involved in the Pats offense that still hasn't solidified its pass catchers. And then now from rookie to vet, we move on to Aaron Jones. The major draw with Aaron Jones is that he finds himself on a potent and creative Vikings offense where he did finish as the PPR RB15 last season. He's been a steady rock for fantasy over these past few years, and I think he can still be a viable RB2 this season, but I do think his fantasy ceiling is capped at around RB16, considering Jordan Mason was brought in. And on top of that, Jones is getting older, and we don't know how effective this offense is going to be under JJ McCarthy. Next up, we move on to DeAndre Swift. So DeAndre Swift is super frustrating for the fact that his talent and versatility never amounted to any elite fantasy production. But now you have an offensive mastermind in Ben Johnson coming in who has worked with DeAndre Swift in the past in Detroit. And seeing what Ben Johnson was able to accomplish in Detroit with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery gives DeAndre Swift some really appealing upside. And especially after he managed to finish as the RB19 last season on a struggling Bears offense. So next up, we have a pair of rookies to end this tier, and that's Caleb Johnson and RJ Harvey. So Caleb Johnson has moved up my rankings throughout the summer, and I do believe he is going to be the lead back in Pittsburgh sooner rather than later in what's kind of a thin running back room. And more touches just means more fantasy production. And the other rookie is RJ Harvey, who's honestly moved down my rankings throughout the summer because he's looked a bit raw in the preseason, and J.K. Dobbins has been listed as the RB1 throughout the preseason. And considering J.K. Dobbins did find a lot of success last year, I don't think it's crazy that he does start the year as a starter behind this phenomenal Broncos O-line. But the difference between these two rookies is that you can get Caleb Johnson a whole round or two after Harvey, and as of right now, they both hold some risk and some upside. And then next up, we move on to Tier 5. So Tier 5 are guys you can start based on exploitable matchups, bye weeks, etc. You can expect respectable production from these players, but not weak winning production. So these guys are running backs who have the realistic potential to finish as top 24 to top 36 players at the position. So first, we have a guy that is a fringe guy, and that's David Montgomery. I mean, Monty could finish as a top 20 running back again this season, but with the explosion of Gibbs last season and the departure of Ben Johnson, I could equally see him finishing right around RB24. I still think he's going to be heavily involved in this Detroit offense and be a massive contributor in real life, but I think we certainly do need to tamper our expectations for fantasy. And then following Monty, we have Kenneth Walker. I know people are going to say this is nonsense. He should be in tier 3 or tier 4. But until I see this man stay healthy for the majority of the season and finishes a top 15 running back, I don't want to hear it. It finally looked like he was going to break out last year, but then he got hurt, tails old his time, and finishes the RB27. The rap sheet of injuries is very concerning with K9. And check out my running backs to avoid video for the full breakdown on why I won't draft Kenneth Walker this season. And another player you will find in that video is Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon was soundly in tier 4 for me at the start of the summer, but there's so much going against him now at this point that he's borderline undraftable, especially where he's going. And on top of all that, he may now start the season on the PUP list, and I can't justify drafting Mixon, but he could still finish not as the RB3, but as a fantasy RB3 because he has been a great NFL running back throughout his career. And the next 4 players in this tier are very confusing for me to figure out, but they all belong in this range. So first we have Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard was honestly really solid last season, finishing as the RB21, but it was obvious that they were beginning to phase him out of the offense over the last month or two. And when you combine the reports out of Tennessee saying they're going to lighten his workload this season, with the fact that the Titans are most likely going to face some growing pains with the rookie quarterback, it's hard to imagine Pollard finishing as the top 24 running back. And next up is Isaiah Pacheco. And honestly, guys, I have no idea what to make of the Chiefs running back room. And if anyone outside of the Chiefs org says they do, then they're just lying. Pacheco is either going to have a top 24 fantasy running back finish and make us all look dumb for not drafting him, or he's going to finish outside the top 30. So take what you want with that. Pacheco is very confusing to me. And in best ball drafts, I do find myself sometimes targeting him, but in redraft drafts, it's hard for me to confidently draft him. Next up, we have Tyron Tracy for the New York Giants. He's also very confusing, but he's also very intriguing. I've said this throughout the summer. I think Tyron Tracy is by far the best running back in this Giants room, even with the addition of Cam Scatabo. We saw him shine last season as a rookie, and I would not be surprised at all to see him finish around RB24. The main concern here is the Giants' offense. It could be a mess, and if it is a mess, it could derail Tyron Tracy's sophomore campaign. And then next up, staying in that division, we have Javonte Williams. Javonte should be the RB1 in Dallas week 1, but he does have a promising rookie in Jaden Blue threatening to take his role any given week. But running backs do tend to find success in Dallas, and Javonte Williams honestly is a fine RB3 target in fantasy this year. And then next up, we have a trio of backups. That's Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, and J.K. Dobbins. The common theme with all 3 of these vets is that they all find themselves as backups to rookies on offenses where they can find success. If anything were to happen to the rookie starters, or if they're not NFL ready yet, then these guys are going to find scattered success throughout the season. But I do expect these 3 to find themselves in running back committees where they'll see weekly touches and might collect a touchdown or 2 here and there. And the final player in this tier is Jordan Mason. Every positive about the Vikings offense that we touched on with Aaron Jones applies to Jordan Mason here. Plus, who knows? Maybe Father Time finally catches up with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason finds himself as the lead back in Minnesota before the season is said and done. We saw he's more capable of doing that. Or he's more than capable of doing that when he filled in for CMC last season in San Fran. So we'll see what happens with Jordan Mason in Minnesota this season. And finally, I want to highlight some sleepers who didn't crack the top 5 tiers. But before we move on to sleepers, a guy who barely missed the cut is Tank Bigsby. I wanted to put Tank Bigsby at the end of tier 5, but I can't because I have no idea what this Jags backfield is going to look like this year. ETN, Bigsby, or Tuen could emerge as a fantasy stud in Liam Cohen's offense, or they could all be mid. But I do think Bigsby has a really solid shot at being that guy based on what we saw last year. And with the price tag being so cheap, he's definitely worth the chance. And now some sleepers I've been targeting. So first we have to talk about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who may or may not be the reason the Commanders are cutting ties with their lead back, Brian Robinson. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt has been turning heads all summer as a 7th round pick, and with the Commanders likely moving on from B-Rob, there's speculation that JCM could get a crack at the lead back spot this season. Sure, Eckler or Chris Rodriguez could emerge as the lead back, but this is fantasy football, and we like gambling on rookies with buzz, so screw it, let's ride with JCM. And another rookie to target is Dylan Sampson. With Judkins missing his entire rookie training camp and preseason, it's really impossible not to turn our attention to fellow rookie Dylan Sampson. Judkins 100% was a more premium draft pick coming into the draft or draft prospect this offseason, but Sampson is not a scrub. Sampson had a successful college career at Tennessee, and with the uncertainty around Judkins, Sampson could steal the show on a Browns team that's still searching for its identity. And then three other rookies to keep an eye out for late in drafts are Jaden Blue, Woody Marks, and Brashard Smith. All three of these guys are low risk investments who have immense upside if a lot of things fall in their favor. And lastly, we have Braylon Allen. So I like Braylon Allen in deeper leagues simply for the fact that he's a cheap price tag, and the Jets have made it clear through their reports and through the preseason that there's going to be a split between Braylon Allen and Breece Hall this season. So we can bank on that split and plug in Allen when desperate times call for desperate measures and hope his touches amount to fantasy points. So that's my final running back rankings for this offseason. I thank y'all for tuning in. I'm going to have wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends out over these next few days, and I'll catch y'all later. Peace.